I think it was during one of the budget hearings. There was someone who came in and conflated our organization with parking and gun crime, all in like one
Wait,
or two
really?
sentences.
The most
I
recent budget hearing that was said? I didn't
it
listen to it
was
all. I was going to ask you about the weird conspiracies about our streets. Like you were destroying this city. There's like a small hardcore group of people that hate you with a passion. You should probably take it as a badge of honor that you're doing good in the world. But it's like this. I don't know if Carol Becker is ringleading like a group, like a breakaway sect of the DFL Senior Caucus.
We're rolling. We're rolling.
All adult cat people. This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.
This is the Wedge Life Podcast. I'm your host, John Edwards, and my guest today is José Antonio Zayas Cabán from Our Streets Minneapolis. José is going to be rattling around a spoon in his saucer. So if you hear that, that's what's happening. It's good to see you, José. Thank you for being on the podcast.
It's good to see you too, and I'm glad to be here.
So you're going to have a new event series in 2024 called Imagine. But before we talk about that, I want to just ask about the way the budget played out and open streets. And so initially, you guys had said you needed like $800 and some $1,000 to put together like a 5-event series. There was a council proposal for $500,000 or something like that. Final thing that was approved was $250,000. Maybe just generally, how do you feel about that, and whether you feel like that amount of money will enable Our Streets to participate in hosting open streets next year?
Well, the way I feel about it is that the amount of money gets us some of the way there. So we still have to do some work to make sure that there's enough funding to reasonably put together the events. We are going to apply if there is an RFP, for sure. And so I think at the very top, it's really important to say that, we founded this event series. We've been doing it for 12 years in Minneapolis. We love doing it. We want to continue to do it. And the discussion around funding is really more about making sure that it's sustainable, not just for the organization, but also for the community. You run into some roadblocks as funding changes, but also the amount of staff time and work that it takes to do them to that scale and do them successfully, to do all of that community engagement that precedes the events, to make sure that the events are full and also representative of the richness and diversity of the communities. We've estimated that takes about 3 or 4 staff people. And also, the way the event series has evolved, we want to continue to better feature musicians and artists from neighborhoods. And we want to provide the stages and the resources for them to come on. So it really feels like it's really neighborhood-oriented event. But, with anything like this, I submitted a letter to then Public Works Director Margaret Anderson-Keller on August 4th with this budget to say, hey, this is how we're going to be able to move forward sustainably, and here is a sample budget for 5 events. And then after we sort of accidentally found out that they were going to end that partnership, there was a lot of energy around it. We submitted scenarios for 10 and 13 events. We've been disappointed. A couple things. The city council sort of took Public Works at its word that it didn't need as much funding as they had originally proposed. We had told some folks on staff that we would be able to do a 3-event series for that kind of funding at $500,000. And what's disappointing about that is that The Department of Public Works as the City of Minneapolis has never played any role in coordinating Open Streets Minneapolis. It's always been an Our Streets Minneapolis event that we do, that we get hired as a service, to do for the city in partnership with Minneapolis. But that number that they sort of provided and where it ended up is basically made up. And at no point were there any outreach to kind of consult us in terms of what the actual costs were or the explanation for these costs. And so when they did that, it also felt like a bit bad faith, as we do advocacy, and obviously we're critical of the city, the department, and individuals in the city. It felt like a bad faith effort to kind of undermine the clarity and the transparency that we had provided to make sure that it was well understood that, one, we wanted to do it, two, we wanted to do it sustainably, three, it had become unsustainable. And so, we still think there's a path forward and we're going to continue to pursue it, but what happened in terms of changing that dollar amount and cutting it by half was basically at the word of the department that has never participated in Open Streets and in general has never really been very supportive of our work to coordinate the event, other than the expectation to sort of be the department who deals with the vendor. So, but we, just like I said, we stay optimistic, we stay positive, and we're going to charge ahead when there's an RFP. We're going to pursue the process and see what we can figure out.
Okay, let's talk about your new event series for 2024, Imagine. I've read the materials. It's going to be a block party style of, I'll characterize it as public engagement, that in the form of a block party, reimagining what the street in your neighborhood can look like. Am I characterizing it accurately? Is that what Imagine is?
Yes, and we're really excited about that because this is something that we've been kind of piloting and talking about doing for a couple of years since we launched the Bring Back Six campaign. And it touches on several ideas, but now in just a very orderly, integrated way. One of them is that an Imagine event will be preceded by a lot of engagement with the community to create space for better understanding what's happening in your street, what's possible in your street, what are the processes, what are the avenues to create some change around your street. Try to bring in decision makers or staff to engage with communities and create opportunities for visioning and ideation and community input, co-creation, and at the same time, coordinating an event that's sort of the culmination of this process where anyone can come out and have a look at what the result of this engagement is, these community preferred alternatives for their corridors and their neighborhoods, and also do it in such a way where the content of the event is a demonstration of the potential for that neighborhood to really strictly focus on bringing in entrepreneurship talent, artistic talent, musical talent, community representation, and fill that block with basically a celebration of all of this work that was done and everything that could be. But I think the most important thing is that it integrates our advocacy, because that's how I would primarily describe Imagine if I was talking to a community member. It's also a promise from our organization to say, okay, we've taken on the task of providing resources and expertise to do something that leads to this event, but after the event, we'll go out and advocate for this outcome to make sure that it actually comes to life. And in a way, it's sort of this process of working in parallel with what normally is sort of these handed down project alternatives that come from a department that have little to no connection with neighborhoods or communities, and bring a community preferred alternative into the department, into that process, or to a policy advisory committee and say, look at the result of months of work with community members, and we present with the tools and the resources and the information and really the limits of what's possible. Look at what they've come up with. Let's make this community preferred alternative an actual project alternative for this project that's ongoing in whatever department or jurisdiction.
So, should I interpret this as a criticism of the way traditional forms of community engagement by public works departments, transportation departments have been conducted? And is it, if it is a criticism, like any particular levels of government, do you have any specific projects in mind where public engagement has been like deeply inadequate, or is it just like a general thought that this could be done better at all levels?
Yes to both. Ideally, if things work out, the initial 3 events in 2024 will be in near north, in and around this idea of imagining Olson Highway as it was at 6th Avenue North, and something that really prioritizes the near north community. The other one would be in Cedar Riverside. It's the most diverse neighborhood in the state of Minnesota, and it's a neighborhood that is literally trapped by so many infrastructure projects. It just, it can barely catch its breath. And then the other one we're working towards having in 2024 would be on Eat Street. So basically, between downtown Minneapolis and the Kmart site on Nicollet, a road that is already in very bad shape, but it's also full of commercial businesses and a lot of potential for example, a car-free street, fully pedestrianized street, to also start inviting the idea of, what could these streets look like if we start looking towards the future where we pedestrianize corridors that might really benefit.
Do you want to dance on the grave of the burned down Kmart and shut down the entire street to cars? I thought the problem with the Kmart is that it cut off cars from accessing the other side of the street. Now you want to cut off cars from accessing East Street at all? Well, I don't know if this is going to fly, Jose.
We'll see, right? And that's the idea that I think if you do it with a lot of time and patience and with genuine community engagement, we found in our work, and as we take a lot of time to go out door knocking and engage with neighborhood partners and give presentations. We don't just do public advocacy, and we're not just in spaces where decision makers are. And if you take time to provide relevant information and also data and alternatives and how these things might work, but more specifically, how it would benefit communities, and you start to help people identify with those benefits and they themselves benefiting from those outcomes, those ideas start to stay. And we have seen that with the Twin Cities Boulevard. We have seen that with Bring Back 6 as we spend more time. To give you an example that sort of helped us start thinking about this idea of Imagine as an event series that is sort of preceded by engagement, followed by advocacy. In North Minneapolis, there's a Best Buy Teen Tech Center, and some of the kiddos who have to go to Summit Academy to get to the Teen Tech Center or just go to school, since Heritage Park is divided, they've had friends who have been hit by a car there on Olson. And they designed art crosswalks as part of their class in the Teen Tech Center, and they designed bus shelters and these sort of like really elaborate gardens around the bus shelters. Because we had already been doing this Bring Back 6 project, it kind of gave them the idea like we should take this class and this opportunity to design something that we think meets our needs as kids who have to cross the street and are afraid to get hit by a car. And that's kind of the idea. It's like you introduce things, but you stay long enough to make sure that people have an opportunity to engage with these things and really understand them and can take ownership of them. It also makes our work really different as an organization, because that's where we want to be, is that we want to be advocating for the community's vision for their future in their neighborhoods. It's also kind of the same problem that emerges with, the Hennepin stuff and Lindale, where the relationship between businesses and community members is adverse. And, we're trying to say, like, people who live in the communities should have a direct say in how their neighborhoods are shaped and how they're filled and how they feel. And so, to your point, um, it's both, because it isn't just like a random selection of things. Like, we want to be strategic in where we do these things and identify places where there's a lot of potential to demonstrate what could be done around the city. But I wouldn't just call it a criticism, because that's what we're after, is that a criticism sort of falls short of kind of getting up off the couch and doing something about it. We're identifying gaps in how things are done, and we're trying to fill them with a program that is proactive about addressing these gaps. I would be delighted if the City of Minneapolis Public Works Department or the Minnesota Department of Transportation or other departments across the country pick up on that and they start doing engagement that way. That would be awesome. But the idea is that, like, you don't just have to evangelize communities, you don't have to force feed them things. If you get them meaningful opportunities to have input, they know what they want, they know what they need, they know what they're missing. And if you make it exciting and interesting, and also, add some food and music from time to time, then they will engage and participate, and that co-creative, collaborative process will lead to outcomes that people are excited about and they want to live with for a long time.
So as you've been talking, I've been thinking about making Nicollet Avenue through Whittier car free. I think that's a good idea. It's probably an idea that's been kicking around a while, but why not extend the car freeness of this, this pedestrianized downtown portion of Nicollet Mall that the mayor and City Hall has been talking about recently. Like, they want to, Lisa Goodman and Michael Rainville want to kick the buses off Nicollet Mall. I'm afraid that's what the motivation is. But if pedestrianization is so good, I think it might work spreading further to the south. But
there's one other thing I would say is that I feel like we're also going to make an effort to kind of lift this sort of adversarial relationship that community members sometimes have with the business community. Because we've seen the stats, somebody on social media was talking about how there was some little bit of research that came out of some streets in Montreal that were fully pedestrianized, and, for example, business occupancy went up. And we also know that, workers generally don't use cars to travel if they can't afford them. Like, employee retention is often better. And people who don't use cars tend to have more disposable income to spend on their businesses. So, we want to break down those barriers by using good information and go through the trouble of actually modeling these things so that we can talk to business owners and community members can talk to business owners in a constructive way that helps break down that tension, so that business owners who generally have more resources and more time to go to city council and plead for one thing or another, they can kind of get over that fear. And we're also disrupting that that's something I feel happens a lot in Minneapolis, is that fear-based way of communicating with people all the time. You freak them out, you get them to do something. It's like, no, there's a way to have difficult discussions, uncomfortable discussions, in a way that's fruitful and amicable. And we feel like this process will start to help create opportunities for business owners and the community members that they serve to start talking to one another in a productive way, and for that to turn into communication and dialogue with decision makers that leads to outcomes that merge both interests.
You're wrong, Jose. We cannot do this amicably. I remember, so you mentioned Hennepin Avenue. I remember during that, I was at some kind of protest action on Hennepin Avenue, like an event demanding the full-time bus lanes. And a business owner came out and was like, you don't live in the neighborhood. And look at me, I'm Wedge Live. I have a whole personality built around being from the Wedge neighborhood. And this business owner is telling me I don't live in the neighborhood. I don't think we can do this amicably, Jose. I feel like the business community resentment is that's just going to be there. Like you threaten to take away their parking, they're not going to bother to like look at your research about some street in Canada that was pedestrianized. They're just going to be upset about losing parking and that's going to be it. So I'm skeptical.
I think that's fair, and it's also to say that there's a difference. I think between you can't turn everything into a Disney movie. It's more about taking attention and addressing it with dialogue and creating space for discussion. Mutual understanding doesn't have to lead to full unanimous support for one thing or the other. But right now, what I feel is that the discussion isn't happening, and the discussion and sort of the adversarial exchange that's happening is around things that are not fact based at all.
Yeah.
And we feel like, let me put it to you this way: we're going to do the work to start chipping away at that cynicism and that fear, and actively spending more time with the business community to make sure that they're hearing from community members more, and also they're listening to ideas and how they might impact them. And obviously, the Imagine event series is going to be one avenue for us, sort of a vehicle for that. But we have these studies underway where we're modeling the potential economic benefits of highway conversions. And that's going to give us a lot of data about how repurposed land can impact um, GDP, employment, tax revenue in these areas. And, that's hard evidence done by professional firms who have spent a lot of time engineering these kinds of things. And I think that's going to be exciting. And over time, I feel like if we do the work of getting that information out there, we're going to be able to create a little bit of an erosion towards getting away from that cynicism because, we don't really have a solution for how to bring people back to downtown right now. And
Kick the buses off Nicollet Mall, Jose. We have our solution. That's how you bring people. You get the bus riders off Nicollet Mall. That's how you bring people back downtown.
exactly. And you've read the articles where it's like, well, if we just add more parking or made it cheaper or more affordable and packaged it into, it's like it feels like the pandemic has had people sort of permanently change in terms of what their priorities are and the reasons that actually get them to come out to do things. Which is what's so interesting and bizarre about Open Streets, which is like, that's an event series that brings people out, no matter where
Yeah.
they're at. And, that's another thing I'm kind of switching fast, but another thing that I would say more broadly that I think about and worries me a little bit is that right now we are in a place with our governance where a lot of things are being dealt with through enforcement. And in a way, that only just displaces the problem. We're not thinking about prevention as a long-term permanent solution for the things we're encountering. And I think because Open Streets, for example, is something that's so fun to go to, people kind of forget that they're engaging with this idea of what could be because they're enjoying it so much. And Imagine will probably be the same way. It's like you end up having a lot of fun. But fundamentally, underneath that, it's also this idea of like when everything is dealt with through these autocratic moves, where it's like everything is fear based and it's dealt with enforcement and not prevention, and there's no real dialogue. Community gathering opportunities and spaces are really important towards being able to address these issues. And when events like this start to go away or the quality of the events go down, that's often uh, an indicator of something that's happening in the community where you can end up kind of running out of opportunities for that sort of level of self-expression and communication and enjoyment with other people in your community, but also to raise awareness about things that are really important. And so, in a way, we're really fundamentally advocating for the continuation of community gathering opportunities to maintain that healthy level of democratic engagement and accountability with our decision makers. You know, it's very difficult for people, especially who are marginalized and disadvantaged, to find ways to speak up unless there's a collective around these issues. And, open streets or imagine or any kind of community gathering opportunity like that, in my view, needs to be preserved and protected just as much as any other opportunity to engage with your decision makers. Those are spaces for free speech.
Yeah, I feel like our politics went down the tubes during the COVID era because we lost so many opportunities to gather together like that. And so you mentioned the data thing, gathering data and studying the economic impact of transforming our streets. Like, why, I think all the time, why doesn't this data already exist? Why hasn't some government agency with all the money in the world, like the Minnesota Department of Transportation, already have this data? And I don't know, why do I have to go to Toronto or whatever to like look at some one-off study that was done? That this data should have been collected and presented to us already. Like, it's not that hard. It just takes a little bit of money.
Well, I really like that question because I think I think that's like a wonderful justification for why we're doing Imagine and that event series. Is that right now that mechanism doesn't exist. But part of the reason we're doing these studies around I-94 and also on highway to be able to demonstrate non-highway alternatives and land use potential is because the Met Council in Minda right now doesn't have any directives that ask them to study historic racial and economic impacts. When they start to develop and introduce projects into the transportation improvement program, for example, and they don't have any directives to study land use potential and non-highway alternatives, or at the city level, car-free alternatives are sometimes kind of introduced depending on who's subcontracted, but right now it's not a matter of policy to do that. And so we are taking the time also as an organization to advocate for that to become policy at the state. For the Met Council and for MnDOT to just stop building highways, but also to start studying alternatives that give people an opportunity to engage with these ideas, so that they actually understand what's possible. And so, their modeling is really limited to just managing and mitigating traffic. And so they're kind of in this endless Mobius strip or feedback loop, if you may, of studying the same things and how to manage the same things, which is why it ultimately always leads to more expansion and more of the same, or repairing the same things. And so, to a degree, it's also a great question because it's like, the question that we asked ourselves is like, why hasn't this happened yet? But the answer that we came up with was, we need to make an effort to make it happen. And that's what we're going to be doing in the spring. And when these studies come out, I know it'll seem like a lot of boring stuff to look at, but we're going to find a way to package it really neatly for people to actually see how much economic growth can happen when you take 1 mile of a highway and turn it into a community-centered corridor, or 7.5 miles of a highway and turn it into a reconnected downtown to downtown. And we're excited. I mean, I think the potential is going to be tremendous, and I think the numbers are going to make it very interesting or very difficult to turn away from non-highway options.
So are you going to do like smaller scale, a study of the impacts of smaller scale changes? Because we have these debates about parking, like, oh, you're taking off this much parking from Hennepin Avenue. All the businesses are going to die. It's going to destroy the local economy. Uptown will be dead. And it's like not that big a change when you consider how much parking exists on the corridor, including side streets and like parking ramps. So are you just going to be looking at highway removal, or are you going to be looking at other things too?
No, I eventually will be looking at other things too. And I think that's
Okay.
how that process is going to evolve. We obviously we're just funding this thing for the first time. We want to make it sustainable for that reason because, for example, we have a really great partnership with the West Broadway Business Coalition in the North Side, and they understand the needs and they understand the economic impacts of what's happened to West Broadway and also and the climate and health impacts. But they have the same fears about parking, and so it just feels right as an organization for us to say, well, we have the resources and the capacity, and we want to continue to build the resources and that capacity to be able to do this and make it accessible so that um, these business coalitions that are full of businesses that are already struggling, you know, in this position where there's a propensity to kind of lean into this sort of fear-based thinking, um, they can get something handed to them that's really going to help them understand that takes no extra effort on their part, that then it's going to get them excited about advocating for things that will benefit their businesses long term and really benefit the communities where they're at long term as well. Um, but again, doing it in a way that is collaborative and understanding because it's one thing to disagree, it's another thing to go into a community and shame or harm people for not being in the same place as you are. Same as some business owners do to community members. And it's like, we want to say, we're willing to take that heat, whether it's somebody saying something completely ridiculous about parking, all the way to someone having a very reasonable concern and just no understanding. And we would say, like, we're going to ignore that noise. We're going to work hard to present clear and compelling evidence that these things are possible and will be beneficial. So that, just like you're saying, I know every time we talk, we talk about that cynicism, right? And that energy, like, I don't know if it's going to happen. So that we're not telling people don't be cynical. We're telling them let's find a way to put that energy towards something good.
My theory of politics is like go out there and find your friends, because traditionally when stories about street projects are covered, it's like, who is the absolute most angry about this? Let's talk to them. And who is the absolute most enthusiastic about this? And let's talk to them. Or it's framed as city wants to do this and the community is just up in arms, and it's like the owner of the cat cafe is representing the community. And it's like what you got to do is go out and find the people who are very loosely engaged to the topic, who are greatly affected, but like loosely engaged. Go out and make new friends. I'm always skeptical of like softening the attitudes of your enemies, because they're going to be your enemies at the end too. But I'm not a good or friendly person. So,
well, and I think it was during one of the budget hearings. There was someone who came in and conflated our organization with parking and gun crime, all in like one
wait,
or two
really?
sentences.
The most
I
recent budget hearing that was said? I didn't
it
listen to it
was
all. I was going to ask you about the weird conspiracies about our streets. Like, you were destroying this city. There's like a small hardcore group of people that hate you with a passion. You should probably take it as a badge of honor that you're doing good in the world. But it's like this. I don't know if Carol Becker is ringleading like a group, like a breakaway sect of the DFL Senior Caucus to like do a vendetta against you. But like, there's a small group of people for whom Our Streets is like the top issue of things that are ruining the city. And I don't understand. I don't understand it. Like, there's other things going on in the city you could be mad about, not Our Streets.
exactly, and that's I think how we're taking it sort of collectively. These things are going to happen, and just like to say, they're kind of a result of the amount of engagement that we do around things, but also the popularity of the things that we do. And you know, when we go out to do things, like things can become popular and beloved if you do them meaningfully and for the right reasons. And that's what I think sort of creates sometimes a threat, or the idea of a threat, is that permanence. When you go out there and plant seeds and make commitments to communities to see things through, that's okay. And that's what we tell communities. It's like, we're prepared to take that heat and that negative feedback, because underneath of that, just like you're saying, what we're experiencing when we're working with communities is a lot of joy and it's a lot of optimism, but it is still rooted in realism. It's not that these things are going to happen. It's just like what I was saying, it's that this cynicism or skepticism, um, or animosity that people sometimes rightly feel towards decision makers or government that's not serving them, we're helping funnel it into something that could be good in the end. And we're just trying to give it some purpose. And that's the majority of people that we engage with. They're excited about these ideas, and we make it easy for them to get involved with them. And why not then go celebrate them and celebrate these communities? Say, okay, we're going through all this process of ideating, envisioning, and creating these community alternatives. Um, let's demonstrate them in a way that's really fun and cathartic. Um, spend a day outside, kind of looking at these large renderings and enjoying the fruits of all of that labor. But I think in general, people can see kind of past that and that noise. But yeah, absolutely. You see what's happened in some of these hearings and what people come out to say. And to be honest with you, I just don't give it much of a second thought, other than to understand that it's part of what's going to happen. And we just get back to work and try to do the right thing and continue to elevate our work. Now, like I said, we're not going to stop there and say all business owners this way, that way. We're going to do the work to make sure that we're creating consciousness and awareness about what actually can happen. And we feel confident that, especially just like you're saying, there are probably business owners that are like, I know this isn't true. I know this is not how it works, but I don't have something to latch onto. And that's where we want to be. We want to create spaces for other business owners to be like, okay, like there's something for us to jump onto and create our own collectives apart from this fear mongering, where we can advocate for better neighborhoods and better communities in a way that makes sense to us, and we don't have to be overshadowed by the loudest voices, or the loudest critics.
I love it. I loved Carol Becker's, nothing Carol Becker said was true at that public hearing about what was going on with the Open Streets funding. Like, she had her numbers wrong. She had a whole bunch of facts wrong. But I'm just imagining a regular person or even a council member listening to that. I think that's not very persuasive at all. And if you're getting into the weeds on your Our Streets conspiracy theory, what you're not doing is arguing that streets should be reconstructed in one way or the other. You're just so focused on Our Streets that you're not even advocating for whatever your own position is. So good job, Our Streets Minneapolis. You're distracting the other side from having any kind of argument at all. They're just wasting their time with conspiracy theories. I love it.
Yeah, something that comes to mind too, and going back to the Imagine Event series, positive ideation and positive outcomes are always more powerful than trying to do harmful things to other people.
Yeah.
And that's, it's always at the core of what we think about. It's like, if we have something good that compels people and gets them excited, it's always going to outweigh this idea of just trying to be harmful, because there's no goal there. And that's what makes it sort of, just like I say, it makes it sort of very interesting to latch onto and watch. But what makes it sort of unhinged is you're not trying to go after anything other than to hurt people. And ultimately, it's we want to be somewhere else. We want to say, look at something really positive that can happen. And in our mind, and you see it time after time, if you have something exciting and positive, meaningful that people can connect with, and they can see themselves benefiting from that, it's always going to outweigh that kind of behavior.
Yeah, we saw that in the most recent election. in Ward 12 and Ward 7 especially, like the candidates with positive agendas were ultimately victorious, and the candidates who were like, no, I don't think we should do that. I don't have any agenda. I'm just, we need to get back to the basics. Those kind of candidates are like, those candidates didn't do so well. So when I think about, like, I go to a lot of public engagement meetings on street projects. So when I think about what happens at those meetings, there are like poster boards up everywhere, and there's a table with a big map, and they're like, put a pin on the map where there's a problem. And I think about this stuff a lot. I'm constantly out in the neighborhood walking on the streets that are being talked about at these meetings. But I have a hard time like looking at a map and like articulating on a Post-it note like what I think is terrible and problematic. I just can't do it. I can't go back into my memory bank and like come up with specific criticisms other than like this street is too damn wide, traffic is too fast. I have big, broad criticisms, but the trying to get me to nail it down to what intersection is a problem, I'm always like, no, the whole street is messed up, man. How am I going to find one intersection to put down a Post-it note and tell you what the problem is? It's not one intersection. It's not that the sidewalk is broken up here. The whole street is the problem. Like, is that part of what this Imagine series is about? Like getting people out onto the physical street and like demonstrating to them what the big problem is, or making it easier for them to articulate what the big problem is and what they would like to see there. Like if I go to one of these Imagine events, what am I going to be asked to do aside from listen to music and eat food and have a good time? Like what is the practical method here?
Okay, so you touched on a lot of good things. You kind of made our case for us really well, which is what I was talking about earlier. Evangelism doesn't work because people are not connecting the solutions with human lived experiences. And as you've seen in Open Street, for example, we have these mobile history museums. People are engaging with these histories of these neighborhoods that existed. And the reason why they connect with them is not because they're experts at intersections or curb cuts or lane width. It's because they understand what it feels like to live in a neighborhood that's awesome, and they understand what it's like to live in a neighborhood that sucks, you know. And the engagement that would precede an event helps kind of fill in those gaps. You know, for example, we had one session. One of the cooler things that we've done is collaborate with the Million Artist Movement, where the end result was a quilt that was a compilation of people's ideas of the things they needed and wanted in their neighborhood. And the other thing is that it kind of goes beyond the street itself. It's really about reimagining the neighborhood, you know, the actual block. Um, but what we do is connect those lived experiences, whether they're negative experiences or experiences they have in other places outside their neighborhood, to these solutions. So they have that aha moment like, okay, if I want to feel this way in my neighborhood, here are the kind of components that help me get there. And that leads to a little bit more permanence and retention, like you're talking about. But at the event itself, what we're going to celebrate is sort of the result of that work. Is you can come and engage with these rendered visions that are the result of this engagement with these impacted neighborhoods or anybody else who wants to come and participate. So people can kind of see what communities can imagine if they're given the opportunity to engage on that level, to express their concerns, to make the connections between their concerns and their experiences and the solutions that can help alleviate those, ideate about what's possible in a co-creative, fun way, and then see their words and see their ideas come together into something that definitely can be used by a public works department, but it can also be enjoyed by any person who shows up and comes to talk to one of us, and we can be like, look at this. You know, we've been working on this with the community for this much time over these many events, and let's talk a little bit about the neighborhood. Let's talk a little bit about what's happening, and let's talk about here why we created these things. When you remember when we met at the Kmart site and they had the two food trucks or whatever.
We had burritos. We ate burritos together in the Kmart parking lot before, sadly, that it burned down shortly thereafter, after we had burritos together.
Yeah, and it's not to sound conceptual. It's just that it's really important for people to connect with solutions on a human level and understand how they're going to benefit from them, and that just takes more time. Um, but how do I say? And I think the other part is like I completely understand what you're saying about the post-its. It's like co-creation can be interactive. Like we were having a discussion about um, how to perhaps like have a space for kids where we could have like a puppet show to like do a little demonstration of the history of the neighborhood or the impacts of transportation. It's like we don't work hard enough to make things accessible. And you could hire all the consultants in the world, whether you're MnDOT or City St. Paul or whatever. The best way to connect with communities is to have that interaction and let it evolve into things that can become interactive and fruitful in creative ways that still lead to the same results. But obviously these proposals might kind of end up near where you live. But imagine as a community member being able to help put together one of these things with your neighbors, with your friends, with your loved ones, okay, and coming and doing all of this engagement, and then coming to an event where you feel 100% ownership over what's being celebrated at that event, and you're at an event that feels like the neighborhood that you want to see in the future, and you've created a partnership with an organization and other organizations that's going to help see that to fruition. And we feel like that's going to motivate people to get more involved, and that feeling of ownership, that the effort to make those connections between the solutions and their lived experiences are going to be something where like people will go home just as you're describing, not necessarily being able to remember everything, but feeling excited about what's happening and feeling motivated to participate in making it happen.
Jose, what are you looking forward to? This is my final question here. What are you looking forward to in 2024 as we get prepared to enter a new year? And please limit it to streets, transportation, or politics. No personal stuff. What are you looking forward to? What do we have to look forward to next year?
Well, first and foremost, launching this event series. I'm very excited.
You can't pick the thing that you came on to promote, Jose. We just talked about it for like 50 minutes, and you're recommending the thing we spent 50 minutes talking about? No.
As a recommendation. All right.
It's not a recommendation. I'm asking, it's not my typical question. I'm asking what we have to look forward to, and it can't be the thing we just talked about for 50 minutes.
Okay. Well, I am looking forward to finding out who the new public works director is going to be.
That's a good one. Yeah.
And at the same time, really nervous about it.
Yeah.
And
Lisa Goodman. How about that? The return of Lisa Goodman.
Yes.
Her best friend who just left the job makes Lisa Goodman the new public works director. Lisa Goodman and Margaret Anderson Kelleher together again to destroy our lives.
Seems like
I don't know if that's going to happen. I hear
Yeah.
lots of bad things about how Lisa Goodman does not work well with staff. I know that we're supposed to tell stories about how warm and fuzzy she is, but Lisa Goodman as your boss doesn't sound great if you happen to like have bad news for her. So I don't want to go on a Lisa Goodman tangent, but
I don't know if this is the oppositional hot take. I'm not normally a natural contrarian, but my take is if you don't feel good about a person who's retiring, just wish them well and leave it at that. That's totally okay. You don't have to make things up about them. Just wish them well. Like treat them like human beings, but you don't have to lionize them or put like sprinkle rainbow sparkles over them or whatever. It's like just let it go. And I would be concerned if that's the direction that we went in with Lisa Goodman as public works director.
I don't want to start that rumor. I don't know
Yeah.
how likely that is to happen, but that's like the worst case scenario.
Yeah. But I think that's the other thing I would say I'm really looking forward to, which is um, we, kind of getting to work on things at the state level, and digging into, sort of that first step in the transportation bill and making sure that implementation is actually benefiting the communities that have been most harmed by past transportation decisions. I think there's a lot of potential, and obviously we're going to put time and work into it, but there's a lot of potential to do a lot of good things around that. Um, and in politics, um, I don't engage with it too much at all. So I think that the new city council in Minneapolis and in St. Paul um, could open new doors, but um, I'm hopeful that we are looking past um, really well crafted statements and social media content and actual legislation, difficult as it might be, to live up to all of these promises that happened during all of these campaigns. Because as far as I'm concerned, and for the work that we do, um, elected officials are public servants. We have plenty of great people like you who can produce great content and commentary on what's happening. These people should take on the responsibility of making these things come to life. So I am excited at the possibility, but obviously, in my job and our job is to make sure that accountability actually takes place. Ultimately, that's what we're looking to: is what is actually happening and what are they actually deciding to do.
So, on that note, I'm kind of excited that the city council added some staff in their legislative department. Like they're starting to crawl out of the hole that we dug for ourselves by switching to a strong mayor form of government. So, I feel like the Minneapolis City Council is going to have some legislative capacity and some maybe momentum and motivation to do more legislating and not just like leave it to the mayor to decide what he's going to do. And for a public works director, you know what? I'm hoping for a public works director who like believes in the transportation action plan, that like really honestly believes in it and not like pretends to believe in it. Like I remember at Margaret Henderson Kelleher's confirmation hearing, she was asked like, do you support the transportation action plan? And she said yes. And everyone at home was like, okay, a good one, Margaret. But just hire a professional who actually like believes in this stuff and believes it's a good thing and we should follow through on it and like it will improve people's lives. Just get somebody who believes in it. Because if you
I
don't
think that's
believe it, you're going to
exactly
be
right.
bad at implementing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And there were some people at that hearing who advocated for her to get that position, and look at where we are now. And I think that's also, I mean, that speaks directly to where we're at, which is transportation action plan is sort of part of Lisa Bender's legacy, you could say. Um, it's not funded, and we wanna get to a place where it's actually really implemented across the city. Um, and so exactly, I think that's really well said. It's like it'd be great to have people who are willing to go fight for it in the city, in addition to obviously the advocacy efforts that are coming in from the outside. Um, and as far as the strong mayor, like I was saying earlier, um, even though we technically have a democratic process, when the behaviors of governance are autocratic and they're motivated by personal insecurities, by sort of installing a lot of fear and making everything sort of a binary dichotomy between creating fear and enforcing it, that's not progress. We have to get out of that cycle, and we have to find ways to encourage people to start believing in other things, outside of just being afraid of them. That isn't progress. And so I would, just like you're saying, I think it would be great to see more movement towards things that people can get behind so that I start thinking positive and feeling positive about governance, and we start to see steps in the right direction.
Jose, thank you. José Antonio Zayas Cabán from Our Streets Minneapolis. We had a great conversation about the new Imagine event series for 2024. I'm looking forward to attending one on East Street in Whittier, hopefully. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, and it's nice to be here again.
This has been the Wedge Live podcast. I'm your host, John Edwards. Thank you for listening.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.